This video is about collectivism. It's a dirty word to be called a collectivist too. I was just thinking as I was clicking and waiting for this thing to start recording. Yeah, if you argue with objectivists or market anarchists, you'll end up being called a statist, or even worse, a collectivist. But anyway, okay, this is not about that. The thing is, I was with a friend, and we were watching a film on some failed governments, and she said, "Isn't it funny how so many socialist governments come from failed capitalist governments?" And I replied that, well, this is what Marx said. You know, Marx's theory was that the capitalist system would grow and grow and build more and more infrastructure, and eventually the workers would simply take it. They would seize it, and simply being an important part, not with the communist style revolution with a lot of work, but you know, they would literally just take it. And I think they would inherit it almost. And I think there's a lot of, a lot of truth in that kind of picture. It's one kind of evolution. I think that could very well happen if you let history just ramble along in that direction. Especially as the workers get more and more protections against violence by the state, that'll be, at some point the workers will be doing everything, and they will have sort of seized control just by taking responsibility even. Now, Marx made a couple key flaws. One, I think he made a serious flaw about how that power would be seized. Because if you did follow this evolution where capitalism itself just grows and completes, and then, like a fruiting process, that's just over and it dies away, and the fruit of a free society is left, and the people just keep using the system that this energetic capitalist era has used to create the infrastructure. I think if you had that kind of process, that the distinctions between private and public would be breaking down this whole time, and there wouldn't be a revolution, there wouldn't be a seizing, it wouldn't even be truly an inheritance. It would just be slowly, it became more and more the fact that the people had control of their own lives. So, Marx seemed to think that there still would be a revolutionary moment. It would be ripe and sort of more assured of succeeding. It'd be ready to happen, but it'd still be basically some sort of a revolutionary thing. And this mistake led to his very serious mistake of getting involved with skipping that whole thing to begin with, and supporting workers' revolutions, which, according to his theory, were trying to skip a stage of development. You need to have capitalism in order to get to the workers' paradise that he pictured in his theories, as opposed to in his political work. And the other problem I see in Marx, though this I'm not sure if I can ascribe to him or just to Marxism and what has been ascribed to him by others, but is the idea that the collective is worth more than the individual. Okay, now I don't think that's the right way to look at it, because if you minimize the value of the individual, then you're minimizing the value of the collective. The collective is made of individuals. Its value is, the combination of the values of its individuals. If you minimize it less and less, then that total is going to be less and less. And if you minimize it to zero, make it negligible, so it might as well be zero, then the value of the collective is going to be zero. But you also, I'm not a big fan of maximizing things. I believe we need optimum values and balance and whatnot. So I would look for a way of balancing, uh, everything appropriately rather than maximizing. So, you can maximize the value of the individual to the point where it doesn't harm the collective, because as you maximize the individual, the value of the collective goes up until a limiting point where you've allowed the individual the freedom to oppress others, the freedom to interfere with other people's freedoms. All right, because then his individual value might go up. However you want to calculate the value, monetary, moral, anything, his value might still go up. But because he's oppressing other people, their value won't go up. Okay. Now we can look at things from a collective point of view or an individual point of view, but we do have to remember that the collective is made up of the individuals. Anybody that wants to say, well, I don't want to look at it from the collective point of view, there's only individuals, fine. You just have to do the extra math. You have to take all of the individuals and add their attitude up. But we can have these conceptions of a collective and understand its material interests, for example, compared to the material interests of an individual. So for example, with slavery, some people are like, but if you base your philosophy on self-interest, then there's the slave owner, it's in his self. Well, I don't think it's in his self-interest, even as an individual. But insofar as it's not my place to decide, for one, and two, maybe I'm wrong, maybe that his desires are such that he's getting more from being a slave owner than he could in a free society. It's still true that from the point of view of the collective, it's not in their self-interest. So at that point, it's a battle. It's like, can everybody else besides the slave owner see that they need to stop the slave owner because of their self-interest? And the slave owner simply becomes somebody that has to be fought against. We recognize, well, we know why he's fighting, because he's protecting his wealth of slave owning. And we're not into that. So the point for me is that as a moral system, it still works, because you can look at the value of the collective. The slave owner can say, well, it's in my best interest to do it, so I'm going to keep doing it. But if he looks and honestly looks at the whole human culture around him, he can't say it's better for the whole human culture as a whole for those slaves to be slaves, except for pretending that the slaves are not a part of his human culture and refusing to look at things from their point of view. So, I think these things do join together, and in collectivism, the value does come out of the individuals, but you don't want to just talk about individuals, because it's then you're not going to talk about the network theory of human interaction. You're not going to talk about systems of humans. It's as if we're not going to talk about motors, we're just going to talk about gears. And as soon as I start talking about how 10 gears work together to change the torque ratio, and you're going to say, no, we just talk about gears. Well, you can talk about this a gear at a time, and you should talk about it a gear at a time. But it's also possible to just talk about the system. Once you do the analysis of all the parts and how they work together, you have a system design, and you can discuss the system. And when we're talking about collectives, we're just talking about systems of human beings, where we've done the calculations based on it being made of individuals, and then we use those calculations to model, a culture. Cheers.